Assalamu alaikum. I am Muhammad Hamza. I'm a freshman student of SSC. Uh, I welcome you all on the behalf of LUMS Religious Society in this talk. This talk will explore the importance of intellect in understanding and following Islam. Moreover, the arguments of the people who oppose this idea will also be discussed in this talk. Our honorable speaker, Dr. Khalid Zaheer, is a well-known scholar of Islam. He offered Islamic courses on ethics and economics in many institutes of Pakistan, including Aga Khan and LUMS. In this talk, he will tell us about the importance of intellect in Islam. I welcome him and I would like to invite him to initiate this talk.
Thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I begin in the name of Allah, whose mercy is profound, whose kindness is forever. There is a couplet very well known when I was young that says in Urdu, "Ye to wahi jagah hai, guzre the hum jahan se." Not very long ago, I used to teach here, and I taught most of all Islamic studies. There were a few years when I was the only one teaching Islamic studies, but things do change. One of the things that when I taught and I keep teaching is the belief of what Islam invites us to acknowledge. Belief in God, belief in life hereafter, belief in the reality that there is divine revelation that has been sent by the Almighty for humans to be guided. Obviously, the question that arises is that on what basis do we invite people to have faith, to believe? The question is particularly important because God has arranged for humans to not all be the same. Let's face it, we are born Muslims. Only yesterday I was talking at dinner to somebody who was a Sikh. Huge number of Hindus across the border. By the way, some of them living on this side of the border as well. Last Sunday, I was talking to a group of some 30-35 young people, 10 of whom were Hindus. And we know that the world population is comprised of more Christians than Muslims. So obviously the question is, what are we saying? Are we telling others that, look here, Islam is our faith, we are comfortable with it, and your faith is Christianity, feel comfortable with it? As my Sikh friend was saying last night, and you know what, Paji, my faith is not very different from yours, but let's do what we do and believe in what we believe in, and let's be together and feel good. I said to myself, I didn't tell him, you're right, brother, but I'm a bit confused. You know what? Because my God and your God, my creator and your creator are the same. Does my creator really want that you should believe in things which are somewhat different from what I believe in? No. The reality is only one. And therefore, it is the same reality that needs to be acknowledged. It's a long debate, it's a complex issue, but I honestly feel very passionately about it. I was looking at this Sikh gentleman who's, by the way, whose father was born in Rawalpindi. Then they migrated to India. From there they went to Australia, came from Australia all the way, and this was his third visit. So what I'm saying is, that the question is, when we say that we are Muslims, we believe in God, one God, we believe in the life hereafter to be a reality, we believe in Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to be the messenger of God, the last prophet of God. What is the basis? I mean, how do we say that? How do we talk to people about it? I mean, if it was just my faith, I think probably I wouldn't have asked these questions quite as strongly. But if this faith has to be communicated to others, then I think a very legitimate, valid question is, on what basis? Why should anybody else leave his, her faith and join us? The answer that I've found as yet in the Quran is that it's because the faith, belief that we are presenting is backed and supported by such strong intellectual arguments that we feel good about it. And we also feel strongly inclined to invite others on the basis of those arguments, intellectual arguments. So, before I teach beliefs, before we teach beliefs, I tell people that I have to overcome a hurdle. The hurdle is, the difficulty is, that as soon as I begin to suggest that we need to believe on the basis of arguments, intellectual arguments, I come across a difficulty, which is there are many Muslims who believe that it is not a great idea to use intellect in matters of religion. Now, if that's true, then I am in serious trouble. What I am teaching is, if not blasphemy, it's misguidance. So, and the reason why it's a serious difficulty is that had it only been an idea, a thought, an assumption, conjecture, well, I would have said that forget about it. I mean, I don't care. But the difficulty is that the religious people who believe that we are not allowed to use intellect in matters of religion, they present religious arguments. They present arguments from the Quran and Hadith. So, we need to understand those arguments. And, in any matter of dispute, whether religious or otherwise, if you have two or more alternative contesting points of view, how would you decide which one is the correct one? By discussing, by looking at their respective arguments. Not because you feel that one point of view is more attractive for me because of aesthetic reasons or emotional reasons, but it's simply on the basis of arguments that an honest, intellectually honest person would decide as to whether one point of view is correct or the other. So, what we need to do always is that whenever we have a dispute, whenever we have disagreement on any matter, I'm talking about religion, it's imperative, it's not a luxury, it's absolutely obligatory that we look dispassionately, unemotionally at the different points of view on the basis of their arguments. Otherwise, what we are doing is wrong, unfair. It's intellectually not acceptable. And what I believe is that it's not acceptable to God. Therefore, I will first tell you why. By the way, how long can I talk? I should take until 7?
Yeah,
Huh? My God. As soon as my fuel finishes, I'll be off. So, I will mention here the arguments, not all, but some of the prominent arguments presented by those religious people whom I respect, who believe that in religion, intellect has no role. What are those arguments? Briefly, arguments against, against what? Against the use of intellect. Number one, many Muslims say that right at the beginning of the Quran, the Almighty has mentioned some attributes of the God-fearing people, muttaqeen. And the very first attribute is that they yu'minuna bil ghaib. They believe bil ghaib. And sometimes the understanding of bil ghaib that is mentioned is that belief is blind faith. So what is put across is the understanding that I believe because my father believes, my mother believes, my ancestor believes. Good people believe, religious people believe, therefore I believe. There is an interesting incident that's quite often mentioned by these people, which is about a famous scholar, Imam Razi. Imam Razi was known for his intellectual reasoning in understanding religion and putting it across. So, he was known as a rational scholar. So goes the legend story. Then when Imam Razi was about to die, on his deathbed, Satan came to have a discussion with him. I don't know who heard it, but it's presented very strongly. So Satan asked Imam Razi, do you believe in God? He said, yes. What are your arguments? He presented an argument. And Satan presented a rebuttal. So it was gone. Second argument, gone. Third argument, eliminated. Fourth, destroyed. So he came up with 99 arguments. 99 is a very famous number. So all 99 arguments were gone. And then Imam Razi said, I believe because my mother believed. And he said the kalima, shahada, and he died. And then comes this, crowd saying, Subhanallah, Allahu Akbar. What a great story. So the idea is that because his mother believed, therefore he believes. Not realizing that Gupta's mother believes something else. And John's mother believes something different. So, but one of the bases of the understanding is that people say that the Almighty has clarified right at the beginning that we have to believe bil ghaib, which really means, well, according to their understanding, believe blindly. Another argument that is presented is that the Quran mentions in Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 101, do not ask questions. La tas'alu an ashya. In tubdalakum tasukum. Don't ask questions which, if they are going to be clarified to you or going to be responded to, it's going to cause harm to you. So the idea floated is that, if you're going to ask questions and use your intellect, it's not going to be in your interest. The answers are going to not help you. So there's another argument from the Quran. A third argument that is presented is that very often you come across in the Quran a mention, very clear mention, that good believers are those whose attitude is expressed in these words, Sami'na wa atana. We listen and we obey. So, that's what a good believer is. He listens to what the Almighty has said, he listens to what the Prophet, may Allah's mercy be on him, has said, and he just obeys. There is no mention of using intellect. It doesn't say we listen, we understand, and then we obey. No, we just listen and obey. Like a good soldier, you just say, yes, sir, and you go, you go ahead. So where is intellect? So it really means that in Islam, intellect is not allowed to be employed while you are understanding religion and while you're following it. A fourth argument that is presented is from Hadith, according to which an incident is mentioned when the Prophet ﷺ admonished some of his companions who were talking about taqdeer, predestination. He said that he was particularly upset and he told them that this is not on. People discussed it in the earlier times of other nations and they were led astray. So don't do it. He didn't like it. So again, obviously, the idea that is put across is that taqdeer, predestination, that what you do, God already knows, and therefore it's determined. It's a part of faith. So you can't have discussion on faith, because the idea is that if you're going to discuss faith, you're going to get confused. And the Prophet ﷺ didn't like the idea. So that's another argument. And just one more. I'm not saying that it's an exhaustive list that I'm presenting. Just one more argument. It is said that a man as wise and as deep a scholar as Ali radiallahu anhu, he is reported to have said in the case of masa. You know masa? When you're wearing socks and you have worn your socks in a state of wudu, then in the next 24 hours, instead of washing your feet, you can do masa. Now we have a dispute about what kind of socks they are. That's what is disputed. But the idea of masa is accepted by all. So it is said about Ali radiallahu anhu that he mentioned that had our religion been based on intellect, we would have been asked to do masa from underneath our feet, not from above. But because our religion is based on hukum, not intellect, therefore we do masa from above. So these are some representative arguments of those Muslims who believe that in our religion we have not been encouraged to use intellect. In fact, we have been informed that if you use your intellect, you're going to go astray. So you better be a good, obedient believer, devote yourself to the good deeds, to the understanding of Sharia, and the more you do it, the more you're going to come close to God. Don't get into the ways of using your intellect like philosophers do, and they go astray. So that's what I said is the stumbling block. That's the obstacle. If I was to present my religion and invite others towards my faith, I had a feeling that I'll do it on the basis of intellectual arguments. But how can I do anything on the basis of intellectual arguments if there is such strong claim which is arguing and pleading that using intellect is not on, it's not acceptable? Okay. There are those who don't accept this understanding, and therefore they've got to say something to explain what then these arguments really mean. What is the reality about them? I think that's the key. Maybe what I say would not convince you, but one thing is for sure: no matter what you accept, you've got to honestly look at both sides, come to a conclusion, and then follow what you have decided is right. Honestly decided is right. And continue to keep your options open. Continue to listen to others. Because now, no prophet is going to come. It's only us trying to understand what a certain point of view is saying, who would decide as to which one is correct. So I will now try to present before you what one might call a rebuttal of this first point of view. There are many Muslims, I can't tell you their number, it doesn't matter, but there are many Muslims who believe that this understanding is not correct. And therefore, they come up with the counter arguments. So how do they explain these arguments? How do they explain these verses, ahadith, from their point of view? First one, what they say is that yu'minuna bil ghaib doesn't mean that they have blind faith. This verse of Surah Al-Baqarah at the very beginning, according to this point of view, which is in favor of use of intellect, says that the Almighty is mentioning that God-fearing people are those intelligent people who use their intellect to acknowledge and believe in those realities that they cannot see. So, yu'minuna bil ghaib is actually belief in the unseen. What they say is that the world that we have been given to live in is comprised of two parts. One, the part that we can perceive through our senses. We can see, we can hear, we can smell, we can touch, we can taste. And there is another world. There is another part of this world, this existence, which we cannot see. How do we acknowledge that part? Well, they say that it's only through intellectual reasoning. And the Almighty over here is saying that God-fearing people, God-conscious people, muttaqeen, are the ones who acknowledge the unseen realities even though they can't see them. And it is in actual fact an indirect reference to the unreasonable demand of the Jews who asked Musa alayhi salam, Arina Allah jaharatan, show us God right in front of us. So the Almighty is as if telling them that, look here, my good humans, believers of my prophet, last prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, are the ones who use their intellect to acknowledge the unseen realities because they know that the world that we are living in is comprised of some realities, important realities that cannot be seen, but they still need to be acknowledged. How? Through intellectual reasoning. That's what they say. Now they also go on to explore and clarify that accepting and acknowledging unseen realities is not unreasonable. It's not even unscientific. That's what they say. What they say is that we use reason to acknowledge many realities. I mean, in science, for example, there is a reality that is acknowledged called gravity. Gravity is not something that you can see. You throw the chalk upward and it comes down. It has to be something down there that pulls objects towards itself. That reality cannot be seen. You have to be an idiot to demand for looking at the reality or at gravity, because the nature of gravity is such that it cannot be seen. Right? So what they say is that, unseen realities are the ones that are acknowledged because of the intellectual reasoning, because of the arguments that are presented. And they say that there is so many others, like, for instance, intellect itself. Intellect cannot be seen. You would say that a person is intellectually sound. How? Not because there is something called intellect that he brings out of his pocket and shows to you. It's because he is talking intelligently. Intellect manifests itself through what a person does. It is a reality that doesn't have a physical existence, not at least in this world. Likewise, if there is a mother who loves her child and makes sacrifices for him, her, and somebody says that, look at this mother, she loves her daughter, her son. And some idiot might ask, would ask, where is that love? I want it to be seen. So we'll not draw a picture of, a leaf like you do now. Show love. It's absolutely ridiculous. Love is something that you cannot see. It is only visible through its traces, through its evidences. So what they say is that it's absolutely reasonable and rational to acknowledge that there are certain realities that cannot be seen, and therefore in order for us to be able to acknowledge them, we need to go through the arguments that support their existence, and belief in God, belief in the life hereafter, belief in divine revelation are some of the examples of those realities. The second argument that was presented was that it said that the Quran says, do not ask questions about matters which if they are revealed, they're going to cause harm to you. What they say is that this verse has not again been properly understood when it has been put across to support the cause of not using intellect, because the Quran is actually saying that when the Quran is getting revealed, when it was being revealed, God was revealing His law, His Sharia, and He knew what people needed. He knew what law was to be given to them. So if people were to ask question about His Sharia at the time when the Quran was being revealed, He would have answered. And His answers would also have become a part of Sharia, which He did not want to happen. He didn't want the Sharia to be elaborate, to be detailed, for people to be burdened to follow more and more of the Almighty's instructions. So He asked believers not to ask questions when the law was being revealed, because when you will ask questions, in tas'alu anha hina yunazzalu Quran. If you are going to ask questions about it when the Quran is being revealed, tubdalakum, then you will get responses. You will be responded to by the Quran. And God doesn't want things to be difficult for you. He wants matters to be simple and easy and doable for you. That's why He's not encouraging you to ask questions about the Sharia when the Quran is being revealed. By the way, we do have questions that were answered by the Quran. The Surah Al-Baqarah mentions many questions. So it's not that the Almighty discourages questions. He discouraged unnecessary questions. Questions like the example of what we have in Surah Al-Baqarah, verses 67 to 71, when it's mentioned that Musa alayhi salam asked his followers to slaughter a cow. The requirement was simple. I mean, a cow, any cow could have been slaughtered and the expectation would have been fulfilled. But what these people did, they were not interested. They wanted to avoid following this instruction, and they started asking silly, unnecessary, irrelevant questions. What age should the cow be of? And the Almighty, true to His policy, answered the question. That's what He's saying. If you're going to ask questions while the Quran is being revealed or while the Torah was revealed, He's going to answer them, because the revelation period is actually functioning. So He said the cow should neither be too old nor be too young, somewhere in the middle. And then they said that, wait a minute, we don't understand. What should be its color? So, this was a stupid question. But the Almighty wanted to teach them a lesson. So He said that the color is going to be, of a certain specification. It would be bright, appearing good to those who are looking at it, and the answer came, and the expectation was narrowed down. They had to then go for the cow that had that particular color. And then they asked, we still are not clear. The matter is still confusing us. What does the cow do? What kind of cow should it be? And the Almighty said that it's a cow that neither waters the fields, irrigates them, nor does it do this plowing. It doesn't work for the fields, for agriculture. So then they had to ultimately look for one particular cow which was not easily available. And the matter that was a very simple matter of slaughtering any cow was because of their unreasonable questioning. It went as far as for them to locate a particular cow, which was a pretty difficult process. So the Almighty here is not saying they don't ask questions to understand the Quran. They say that what it's saying is that do not ask such questions which, if answered, are going to cause your Sharia to get more stringent, difficult, and restrictive. So that's what the background is. The third point that they raise is that a good believer is the one who says, I listen and I obey. He doesn't go into the exercise of intellectualizing. What they say is that when you believe somebody to be the messenger of God, that's the most reasonable thing for you to do. What exactly do you mean when you say that a certain person is actually God's representative? He's God's messenger. What it means is that what he's telling you is God's verdict, is God's message. That's what he desires from you. So it is nothing but reasonable for a person who has believed in a certain individual to be God's messenger to follow him. But why did you believe? What caused you to believe in him? Well, the answer is, if you look at the Quran gives arguments after arguments to support the claim that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was God's messenger. The Almighty doesn't say in the Quran that, look here, the messenger has come and now it's all over. You've got no choice. It convinces the reader. If you read the Quran, there are 4 categories, 4 chapters of arguments that have been presented in the Quran to prove, to show, to convince the reader that he indeed is God's messenger. But once you accept somebody to be God's messenger, there is no other reasonable attitude but to listen and obey. Nobody asked you to, nobody forced you to join lungs. Maybe your parents did, but I'm assuming. But once you have joined lungs, it would be absolute downright stupidity for you to say that, look here, I'm not going to take this course. You've made it compulsory Islamic study, I don't want to take it. I mean, this is not your choice, man. You don't have any choice. This is a part of the system of this university that amongst many other courses, you've got to take this course. So, once you accept somebody as God's messenger, you actually acknowledge that he has come from God. So that what he asks you to do in the name of God is what God is telling him to tell you. And therefore, it would be unreasonable on your part to say that I won't do it. The right attitude, the most reasonable attitude is Samena and Bhatana. Like the right attitude while, when you have joined LUMS is, okay, I'll take this course. That's what the system says. I have no choice. So what they say is that this argument is also not a very convincing argument to show that in Islam, intellect is not allowed to be used. Fourth argument, remember, was that they said that Prophet ﷺ did not allow people to talk about predestination. So predestination is one of the call it discussions, one of the points in faith. You have faith in God who knows everything and he has written it down for you. So why should you think about it? That's what they say. you're not supposed to think about faith, God, and whatever is said about him. In response to this particular argument, those who very strongly believe that intellect has to play a definite role in in making people understand religion and believe in its faith belief system. What they say is that people have not understood what the problem was. The problem was that people were going beyond their limits. You see, you know what the difficulty is in taqdeer, in predestination? The problem is that you are given to understand that what you are doing, God already knows. And it's written. And what you are doing, you are going to be responsible for it on the day of judgment. So you say, what's the point? I mean, what are you trying to say, man? I am going to be responsible for something that has already been written. The script has already been written, and I'm going to be asked, why the hell did you say that? And you won't even be able to tell God, oh God, is it not that you told me to do it? That's the kind of difficulty. So people were discussing about it, and Prophet ﷺ, he was upset. He said, don't do it, because if you're going to go start doing it, then you will go astray. I think this is one of the strong arguments people present, that it's not a great idea to start talking about God. I mean, look at so many people who've started talking about God, they've gone astray, they've become atheists. So better not talk about it. But the fact of the matter is that if you look at this whole issue, it has to do with God. And when you understand about God through the Quran, you come to learn about a few realities about God. One of them is that you in this worldly life can only know God through his attributes, through his sifat. He's all knowing, he's all wise, he's all merciful, he's all powerful, etc. So God, we cannot see him in this world. We only know him through his attributes. We have been informed that God, being God, is perfect. All his attributes are perfect, complete, infinite. That's point number one. Point number two is that all his attributes are simultaneously functional. He is at the same time all merciful, at the same time all knowing, all wise, all fair, all powerful. How can we fully understand him? My mind is too small to accommodate, to fathom, to absorb this whole idea. I mean, I am limited. And for me to be able to fully appreciate somebody who is unlimited is actually going beyond the domain of my intellect. That's what the Prophet said. May Allah have mercy on him. That look here, it's something you will not be able to understand. You know what the whole issue is? God knows what I'm going to do tomorrow. Why does he know? Because he's God. Because he's perfect. His knowledge is complete. Had he not known what I will do tomorrow, he won't be a God. He would be imperfect. So God's knowledge is perfect. But God is fair as well. He will not hold me accountable for doing what I did reluctantly, what I was pushed to do, what I did because he knew it. So that's what the problem is. So what we understand is that God knows what I am going to do in the future. But he also knows that what I am going to do in the future is what I will do on my own, at my own volition. I will not do it because God knew it before. Now this becomes too complicated for me to handle. Not because it's wrong, but because my machine is not, its capacity is not good enough for me to be able to handle it. That's what the Prophet, may Allah's mercy be on him, helped people understand. So it wasn't something that he said to discourage people from using their intellect. it was something that was mentioned to tell them that your intellect, even though is very useful, it has its limits. Don't try to use it beyond its limits. So he was the guide. He came from God, and God had sent him to guide all humankind about all important matters. And one important matter was to tell humans, to tell people that look here, your intellect is very useful, is very important, but like all other faculties of yours, it has its limits. You know, like our eyes can see, and they are meant for us to see things. But we do tell each other, and our kids in particular, that don't stare at the sun, lest your eyesight is going to be affected. So likewise is the case with our intellect. The Prophet, may God's mercy be on him, he asked believers not to indulge in discussions which beyond a certain limit would go nowhere. So it was not an advice and an admonition that was meant to discourage use of intellect completely. It was meant to define the boundaries of use of intellect, which is brilliant. I mean, which is, I think, intellectually very sound. It would be arrogant, intellectual arrogance on the part of humans to assume that they can understand everything, and that's what many people do actually. So it's like, for instance, if a teacher of mathematics was to write before you an equation or a theorem that you understand, and you would say that I understand, 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, I do understand. And if somebody writes 2 plus 2 is equal to 5, you would say it's wrong, because I know it's wrong. But what if there is an instructor who is an excellent knowledge in mathematics, far more than you know, and he writes on the board something which you don't understand? The right thing for you to say would be that I don't understand. It's beyond my level of understanding right at the moment. You can't say that, you know what, I don't understand it, therefore it's wrong. You can't say that, because that would be unreasonable. So it is said that this particular assertion on the part of those people who say that predestination is something that we are not allowed to discuss, and therefore what we conclude is that we are not allowed to use our intellect in religious matters. They say that it's not that. It's not realizing properly what this particular guidance meant. It meant to let people know that their intellect has certain limitations, and they have to operate and use their intellect within those limits. Finally, there is this mention of Masa, which says that we are to use this instruction of the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him, while employing the facility of Masa by rubbing socks from above. Had it been intellect that was to be given the authorities to be employed, we would have used it, we would have rubbed our socks from underneath, from below, because socks would get soiled or could get dirty from underneath, from below, rather than from above. Honestly, we know, for instance, that we do tayammum instead of wuzu when there is no water, or when we are taken ill, or when we are on a journey. This facility of tayammum, when we employ it, nobody believes that we are actually cleansing ourselves. It's not that when I do tayammum, I'm getting cleaned. No, it's just a reminder. It's just symbolic. As and when you will have water, you will use water to do wudu. But now that it's not available, instead you are doing tayammum. So it's only symbolic. Likewise, doing masa is symbolic. You do not wash your feet or remove dirt from your feet or socks by doing masa. It's just that you are rubbing it as a symbol, so that you are reminded that when you will remove your socks, you will wash your feet. A man as wise as Ali radiallahu anhu, who was one of the finest and most deepest scholars of Islam, it doesn't seem a correct, attribution. It doesn't seem that he actually said it. When we discuss hadith, we find that there are two ways of scrutinizing hadith. One principle is the principle of riwayat, and the other principle is the principle of darayat, according to which principle it is believed that you look at the possibility as to whether the Prophet ﷺ or the companions would have said what has been attributed to them. So it seems that, it's a statement which has become famous and has been attributed to Ali radiallahu anhu, but it's very unlikely that he would have said it. So these are the counter arguments which are presented. Now, very briefly, I will just mention a few positive arguments. So these arguments, counter arguments, they are negative. There's many positive arguments which Muslims who believe that use of intellect in Islam is important, they present. One of the arguments is the argument that they cite from the Quran, when it said that when the Almighty presented His plan to create man before angels, He said, "Inni jailun fil ardi khalifa." I plan to create a khalifa. They translate it as vicegerent, or somebody who will have independence, somebody who will have freedom, decision-making authority. The angels were alarmed. They said, "What are you going to do? What are you doing?" They are going to create mischief on earth, and they will shed the blood of each other. And we are glorifying you, praising you. Angels who were the embodiment of Samena Vatana, most obedient servants of the Almighty. And yet, when the Almighty presented a plan of a certain project of making man, they did not say, "Samena Vatana, yes sir, what you say is absolutely fine." They actually asked questions. In actual fact, those were objections. They were serious objections. "Sir, we don't understand what you're saying, because this plan doesn't make sense to us." And God was not upset. He didn't say, "How dare you ask this question? Get lost. You have disappointed me." You know what He did? He said, "Inni alamu ma la ta'lamun." I know what you don't know. And then He went on to explain to angels what the reality is. And you know what He said? His answer, His response, God's response, if you allow me to paraphrase it, His response was that, "Look here, angels, you have a point. I don't say what you say is wrong. But you have not looked at the complete picture. You have not looked at the other side of the story. You are right in assuming that man is going to create mischief. Man is going to shed the blood of each other. This is what you have concluded because you know that they are going to be free agents. But have you not looked at the other side? The same freedom is going to be used by others properly, positively, and that is going to cause them to be excellent human beings." So the Almighty arranged for Adam alayhi salam to introduce some of those outstanding humans to angels. And they said, "We got it. We know very little. We know only what you have informed us." So in other words, what they say is that even angels use their intellect and God doesn't mind it. And after they raise correct objections, points that are reasonable, God goes on to explain to them what the rationale is. So they say that this is one important example which shows in the Quran that intellect is important to be employed. Then they say that you look at certain verses of the Quran, like you have in Surah An-Nisa and Surah Muhammad, two different surahs mentioning one point which is actually admonishing very strongly people for not using their intellect while reading the Quran. Afala yatadabbaruna al-Quran? Do they not ponder over the Quran? What is the problem? In Surah Nisa, the Almighty says, وَلَوْ كَانَ مِنْ عِنْدِ غَيْرِ اللَّهِ, had it been from anyone other than Allah, لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا, they would have found a lot of discrepancy, contradictions in the Quran. You know why? Because we humans, we keep learning, we keep changing, we keep evolving. So we contradict ourselves. What I said day before yesterday, today I might change. There is nothing wrong with it because I learn. God is perfect, He doesn't learn. So therefore, if God has sent His message, it has to be contradiction free. But how will you know it? Only by tadabbur, pondering and reflecting upon its verses. And this verse, by the way, if you look at the background, it is actually addressing the weak believers and the hypocrites. And the Almighty is mentioning with surprise, what is the problem? Why don't they believe in our Prophet? Have they not pondered over the Quran? Because had they done it, they would have found therein no discrepancy. And they would have therefore concluded that this man is indeed God's messenger. In other words, what they're saying is that the Quran is actually inviting the reader to use his intellect for him to come to the conclusion that this book is from God, and therefore the man who has brought this book is God's messenger. And they say that what a huge risk God would have taken to invite people to read the Quran carefully with an open mind had there been some problems in the Quran. You know, only the author who is absolutely supremely confident will say that, look here, read it thoroughly, use your mind, use your intellect and see if there are any contradictions. I am telling you there are no contradictions. And that's what is going to lead you to believe that it is from God. So they say that the Quran is very strongly urging the use of intellect. The next verse in Surah Muhammad says, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ, do they not ponder over the Quran? أَمْ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا, or is it that their hearts have been locked? What is the problem? You read the Quran and you're not understanding it. Your hearts are locked. So they say that, if you read the Quran, you'll find that the use of intellect has been very strongly emphasized. A third point they mention is that there are more than 50 verses which are requiring the reader to look at this world and use intellect. Some of the verses are, and I hope my ratta is still there in my mind because I prepared myself for it, and inshallah God will help me. 164, this is 1 liqawmi yaqilun, 190 liulil albab, and 128 liulil nuha. These are only 3 words. There are many other words. Yaqilun, taqilun, tazakkarun, ulil nuha, ulil albab. It's a book for the people who use their intellect. That's what they say, right? So how can you say that intellect is not encouraged in Islam? Only 2 more things, 2 more verses. One, a famous verse, and my goodness, a very strong verse. Well, all verses are very strong, but this one, be ready and prepared. Fasten your seatbelts. This verse, my goodness, you know it already. Surah Anfal, verse 22. The Almighty says, Inna sharra dawab, worst beasts in the law, in the eyes of God, as-summul bukmul lazina la yaqilun, are those humans who are deaf and dumb. They don't use their intellect. La yaqilun. They are worst kind of beasts in the eyes of God. They are humans, but they don't bother to use their intellect. They are deaf and dumb. What does it mean? It means that they have been given ears, but they don't listen carefully. They don't use this facility for them to be able to think. Others are saying things, but they are not analyzing them. They are not using their intellect. They are dumb. They have been given tongues, but they use it for matters which are useless, irrelevant, and they don't speak the truth. They are the ones who don't use their intellect. So they say that how so very unfortunate that a book that has a verse as strong as this one, and those who believe in that book say that in our religion, intellect is not allowed to be used. It's absolutely the otherwise. But last but not the least, I have another verse to present, which I have a misunderstanding that I have discovered it. I always tell people proudly, Alhamdulillah, this verse is something that you will never forget. Not the meanings of it, but the reference number of it. Till the last day of your life, you will remember the reference number. You know why? Because it's Surah number 10 and verse 100. How on earth can you forget? So it's so easy to remember. Surah Yunus, verse 100. You know what it says? My goodness. It says, Ma kana li nafsin an tu'mina illa bi iznillah. No human, no soul can believe except by God's permission, God's leave. I keep telling people that by belief here, it doesn't mean the belief that you get when you are born to a Muslim mother. That's no belief, that's nothing here. It's just accident of birth. Had you been born to a Hindu family, right now you wouldn't say doing this. Must be. Had you been born to a Christian family, you wouldn't do this. Had you been born to a Chinese family, I don't know what you would do. I have no idea. Now you're born Muslim, Assalamu alaikum, how are you? I said, no, please go on. That's accident of birth. Nothing. When the Quran says belief, it means true belief. Belief that is worthwhile, valuable. God says nobody can get it. Ma kana li nafsin an tu'mina. No human, no soul can get belief, illa bi iznillah, except by God's permission, God's leave. That's part one. The next part of the verse says, وَيَجْعَلُ الرِّجْسَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ. And he casts, spreads filth, dirt across those people who don't use their intellect. Got the point? Those people who don't use their intellect, they have dirt spread across them. Dirt and filth of immorality. They tell lies, they cheat, they are corrupt, they cause harm to others, they have hatred, they are jealous. This is dirt, this is moral dirt. God casts this dirt across them. So if you read this verse in the reverse order, what it's saying is that those people who do not use their intellect properly, they are the ones who, by not employing it properly, gradually have dirt and filth of immorality all over them. And this is what causes them not to believe. God stops them from believing. And it all starts from not using your intellect properly. So what they say is, all in all, the Quran is completely and fully endorsing the idea that intellect is to be used for the purpose of understanding religion and following it. Now, the last question that I would address, and I'll do it quickly, fearing that if I don't do it quickly, this hall will be completely empty. So let me do it quickly before everybody's gone, And what will happen is that I'll also run away. It will be an intellectual exercise on my part. I take a sound intellectual decision. The last question is, so what is the relationship between intellect and divine revelation? The answer to this question is that, as I started by saying it, you get faith through using your intellect properly. That's what I have tried to prove. But once you get faith You believe that Quran is God's word, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is his messenger, and you follow that message. Why? Because that message is based on divine revelation, wahi. And divine revelation is what you have discovered through your intellect. It has come from God. So it is a superior source. There is no contradiction between the two. You use your intellect and use it properly, and as a consequence, you get faith, belief. And when you get your belief, you discover God's word, and then you start following it. But again, in order for you to understand divine revelation, you again use your intellect. I mean, there's no other way of understanding God's revelation except by employing your intellect, by understanding the language, by coming up with arguments. Does it mean this? Does it mean that? So, in other words, there is a very strong bond between human intellect and divine revelation. The Quran itself has explained this relationship through an analogy. And that, thankfully, is going to be my last statement. That analogy is that the Quran says that the relationship between intellect, human nature, and divine revelation is the relationship of light upon light. Nurun ala nur. Human intellect and human nature is a light from God. If you preserve it, do not allow it to be contaminated and spoiled. It's a light, a definite light. And divine revelation is a brighter light coming from the sky, from the heavens, from the Almighty. This light inside you discovers the other light. It's like a pilot flame. If it's still there, then it's going to catch whatever gas is there and get brighter, bigger. So the two together then take you to higher levels of understanding, higher levels of appreciating God and His message. So there is no conflict between the two sources. One of them is the guide and the other is the guided. And the two should be employed therefore together. أقول قولي هذا فاستغفر الله لي. This was from my side. I am available for questions if there are any.
Yeah, so you talked about how rationality is important for Islam and how we should look at different perspectives. We talked about that in the beginning, that in order to reach objective conclusions, we need to look at different things. But don't you think that not every person has the same rational faculty, not everyone has the same experiences to reach an objective conclusion or to look at different sides of the debate? For example, if a person who is born in the West or who is not a Muslim, in order to reach an objective conclusion regarding the divine, he wouldn't be able to know what's going on or what's being said in the Quran. So that's like one of the arguments he wouldn't know what one of the argument is. Or also it's very difficult for everyone to know everything or know all the sides of the arguments or all the to make an objective conclusion. So how would we?
What you're saying is true. And what you've said again is based on your understanding that you arrived at by using your intellect. So what you've said is a very sound intellectual reasoning and understanding. Your question is actually a worry that when that's a reality, all humans have been blessed with intellect, some more, some less. Some people are better informed, others are less informed. Some people are born in the West and they don't have any real idea of what true Islam is all about. So, your concern is how would then we have the whole system of understanding come together? Seems to be pretty uneven, unfair, chaotic. My answer is that your question has to do with another aspect of our beliefs, and that is the accountability on the Day of Judgment. Right? Otherwise, I mean, it's not a big deal. Some people know more, some people know less. So what? I mean, that's how it is. People are leading their lives according to their own desires and what they think is right. But this question becomes significant when the understanding and reasoning is ultimately going to decide as to who is going to get what position in the hereafter, and that is going to be a decision that is going to last forever. That's make this particular problem that you raised, which most certainly is there, a very significant issue. In comes the answer from the Quran. The famous the famous verse 7:42. Surah number 7, Surah Araf, verse 42. The Almighty is spelling out His expectations from humans. All humans. What He says is actually three parts, three small parts. Innal lazina amanu wa amilus solihat. Indeed, those who believe and do good deeds. The third part, this was the first part. The third part says, Ulaika ashabul jannah. These are the ones who are going to be the inhabitants of the paradise. Hum fiha khalidu. They're going to live there forever. The middle part that has been inserted by the Almighty as a qualifying statement is, La nukallifu nafsan illa wus'aha. We are not going to hold anyone accountable beyond his capacity, more than his her potential. So in other words, what the verse is saying is that it is on the basis of belief and good deeds that the ultimate decision about the hereafter is going to be taken about regarding every human, every individual. However, God is going to take into consideration the capacity, the potential of all humans. Now, what is capacity, Wusa? It is comprised of two components. Your personality, your level of intelligence, psychological endowments. A, your environment, your parents, the opportunities you get. So God is going to decide about every human, Hindu, Christian, Muslim, Jew, Chinese, European, Africans, everybody, every individual. The Almighty is going to decide what was his capacity and would decide what was the minimum level of performance that should be acceptable from this person given his capacity, given his limitations. And it's going to be on the basis of that the ultimate judgment is going to take place. And God says, I'm going to be absolutely fair. So don't worry if there are differences. Those differences are God designed. They are there by design. That's what He wanted. He wanted me and you to be different in some ways, so that I take you seriously, you take me seriously. We listen to each other. We don't ignore others. We keep our ears open. We keep our mind open. And we don't become arrogant. We don't become biased, emotional. We always take other views with an open mind, and we continue to evolve and improve and look and search for truth. That's what the grand plan is. Honestly, there is no other plan that can make sense. This is the only plan, and that's what worries me. Intelligent people like you studying at LUMS, you should understand God's scheme properly. And, you should have this spirit within you, yearning. My goodness, this makes a huge lot of sense. I want to tell it to everyone. Honestly. I mean, it's so clear. And you ask yourself, could there be any other explanation save this one that could be right? None. So, indeed, different people have different levels of intellect and different opportunities they get for what they can know. But each one of them is going to be judged in accordance with his, her capacity, background, and potential level of understanding. What we say in Punjabi is, Gal muk gayi. Absolutely finished. There is nothing left, honestly. It's a bouncer that has actually struck the head. Nothing can be done about it.
Mic drop.